We're learning of government figures that show thousands of foreigners' criminal convictions have been forgiven, allowing them to enter the country through work and study visas, permanent residency, or visitors. Well, from 2013 to 2024, more than 17,000 had their criminal convictions forgiven. This raises some questions about why the federal government chose to do so and what that means. So here with a closer look at this is Chantal Deloge. She's an immigration and refugee lawyer and regular guest of this program. Good to have you back.
Thank you very much.
So explain, first of all, if people hear the term forgiven, it is very different than a pardon. Explain why forgiven is used in this context.
Yeah, well, what that means is that immigration, once you're declared rehabilitated, that's the term, they overlook the legal consequences of that for purposes of entry to Canada. So your record is still there. The officers will still know about it. It forms part of your background. It's not erased, but it means that you become admissible to Canada.
And part of the concern about this, raised both by the opposition and by other critics, is that there's no transparency for Canadian citizens to know what these crimes were. Because in some countries, for example, homosexuality is illegal. If you've been charged and convicted in a country, we would forgive that here in this country.
Right.
So the concern around transparency is the big discussion that's happening now. Why would that be something not released?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, they would have those statistics. I mean, I would suspect that, first of all, there's a wide variety of infractions. These are not only crimes, by the way. It's any violation of federal law. I had to do an application like this one time for a guy who was convicted of hunting ducks out of season. And that was enough.
Shows up as a crime or an offense.
Yes, that's right. And he actually had to be declared rehabilitated in order to be able to come back to Canada again. And the vast majority of these offenses are pretty minor. I mean, when you hear these terms like foreign criminals, it sounds very scary. But in fact, usually it's Aunt Betty from Australia who had one too many mimosas at a brunch and got pulled over, or, you know, somebody that had possession of one joint or something like that. The vast majority are like that.
What is then the process for more serious crimes if we're talking about assault, murder, grand theft?
Yeah, so the process is exactly the same, but it's a much more rigorous test and a much more rigorous screening. So what the government officer does is they balance off the severity of the crime with the evidence that this person has truly changed their life, is truly rehabilitated, and would not pose any risk to Canadians. So the more serious the offense, the less likely it would be that it would be granted.
And whose discretion is that up to?
It's up to the officer, and at the end of the day, they have to report back to their superiors as well. So it is quite a rigorous process. You really have to prove that this person has changed their ways.
This conversation also becomes a little louder when we're taking a look at what's happening south of the border, when we're seeing ICE arrests that happen around people with criminal convictions. So an immigration and refugee lawyer who recently spoke with the Globe and Mail says that people with criminal convictions facing deportation from the U.S. may try to come to Canada. So how much merit, first of all, does that claim hold?
It is quite possible that they would, but our inadmissibility laws around criminality are actually even stricter than they are in the States. A lot of people don't realize that. So the U.S. is more concerned with crimes that have some sort of depravity attached to them, or what they call crimes of moral turpitude, whereas ours is a much more black and white. Like, if you have a conviction, it almost doesn't matter what it is. It will make you inadmissible if you're a foreign national. There are some exceptions, but they're rare.
The IRCC says that it looks at an applicant's current circumstances, the behavior, and the severity of the offense before granting them access. You used the term before about rehabilitation. They have to prove they've been rehabilitated. What does that mean? What's the proof there?
Yeah, so it's up to the person who's applying to prove it to the officer. So they can give what evidence they wish, but at minimum, they have to show that it's at least 5 years ago that they completed their sentence, that they satisfied all the aspects of it, and that they have had a clean record since that time. That's the minimum. But then you have things like character references, you know, have they addressed the underlying root cause of the crime? You know, if it was an addiction issue, have they received treatment for that? All of those kinds of things.
When you say that our admissibility laws around immigration are stricter than that of the U.S., can you give us a couple examples?
Yeah, well, for example, DUI. An impaired conviction for a Canadian going into the U.S. would generally not cause a problem at all. They would be able to, you know, have entry unless there was an aggravating factor around it. DUI coming inbound to Canada is extremely serious. You need special permits for it, even just to come in for a temporary period, and you need rehabilitation ultimately. And it will stay on your record for Canadian purposes forever until you apply to have it cleared.
When people hear that number, about 17,000 foreigners coming to Canada who have a criminal conviction, and some people feel that number's too high, or maybe there's not enough transparency, what's the bar for concern there?
Yeah, so I mean, there are so many people coming and going from Canada every year. If you look at that number compared to overall numbers, it's really a very small drop in the bucket. And not all of these applications, by the way, are for people who intend on coming here. Some people, they just want to clear it for the future. I've had people that want to apply for it for information only, so that they just know that they could come back in the future if they wanted to. They're not necessarily intending to come back right now.
Always appreciate our conversations, Chantel, because you add a lot of clarity behind a big, bold headline. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.